Hey, ladies, welcome back to the podcast. So, we're going to be talking all things blood sugar today because every time I talk about blood sugar, I get a ton of downloads on that podcast. So, I know that it's something that all of you want to hear more about and about controlling your blood sugar and finding that perfect diet for you based on what your blood sugar does in response to the food that you're eating. And with me today is my friend Dani. Danielle Hamilton is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner who specializes in blood sugar regulation and digestion. She became interested in blood sugar issues when she learned that insulin resistance was at the root of her PCOS. She was able to reverse her PCOS, cystic acne, PMS, and weight loss resistance by reversing her insulin resistance. Her mission is to help others uncover their blood sugar and insulin issues as most people don't know the early signs, as well as help them optimize digestion for low-carb diets. Dani promotes a holistic approach to reversing insulin resistance, which goes beyond just changing the macros. She's the host of the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast and the creator of the Blood Sugar Mastery program. So welcome, my friend, to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So I would love for you, Dani, just to start with your own story of how you fixed your PCOS. PCOS, ladies, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is the number one cause of infertility right now in women. I see so much PCOS in my own practice. So I know that there is a ton of women listening that have PCOS. So how did you fix that? And tell me your story, girl.
Yeah. So I'll start back, in childhood, I was just kind of a sickly kid, always had a sweet tooth. I used to say, I don't have one sweet tooth. All my teeth are sweet. Always drawn towards those refined carbohydrates, cereals, oatmeal, waffles, pancakes, bagels. If it was a sweetened carbohydrate, it had my name on it. And I mean, I was even the kid who would be at a barbecue and I'm like, I don't want the meat. Just give me the hamburger bun with ketchup on it. Like a bun with ketchup,
wow.
like really like some carbs with sugar on it. That was what I used to, it's like,
Who needs
wow.
the meat?
Yeah. And so not surprisingly, I also had some health issues growing up and had a lot of ear infections, a lot of strep throat, a lot of colds, nothing super severe. I had some eczema and things. And when I was in high school, I had to get my tonsils out because I got strep throat 6 times my senior year, which was terrible. And then the following year, I went to college. And of course, the diet gets worse. There's more drinking and late nights and all that and stress. And not surprisingly, I developed really bad seasonal allergies, and the tonsils are part of the immune system. So you take those out and your immune system kind of goes amok. So I got really bad seasonal allergies. I started to develop asthma. And then for graduate school, I moved down to Miami, and the season for allergies is all year round. And I was lucky enough to be allergic to palm trees. So I was so allergic to everything. I was on 3 prescription meds for my allergies, 2 inhalers. Wow. I had to get allergy shots, and I was allergic to so many things that they gave me 3 shots. And then a year later, I was starting to have symptoms again. So I found out I was allergic to more things because I wasn't healing the root cause. So I was just developing more allergies. And so I had to get 5 shots at that point, 5 total, because of all the different things I was allergic to. And I was going broke on copays. So I would give myself, I asked them to let me have this nurse where I worked as a speech therapist. I had the nurse give me the shots, and then she taught me how to do it. So basically I was giving myself 5 shots in the stomach every other day because I was so allergic to everything, so hyper reacting to everything. And at the same time, I was struggling with a lot of chronic sinus infections. And my major symptom from that was that I was so tired. I was just so fatigued all the time. And I felt like I would drop something and just like drop a pen at work, and I would just start crying because my bucket of stress was just overflowing. And I was like, something has to change. I had my gynecologist on speed dial. I was having multiple infections and candida. And it was horrible. It was horrible. And I was in my early 20s. So I was about 23, 24, and dealing with all these crazy issues. And I would ask at the doctor, like, why, why is this happening to me? And no one could answer my question. Everyone's like, oh, it just happens. It's genetics. I don't know. And I never, that never felt right to me. It never sat well. I'm like, why can't anyone tell me what is happening? And so at the same time, I was working as a speech therapist in a skilled nursing facility. And so I had a lot of patients who were very, very sick, so many chronic diseases, so many prescriptions. And here I was 24 on 5 prescriptions, 5 shots. And I was like, what? And then, calling my doctor every other day to get a new prescription for things. And I was like, what is going to happen to me when I'm 75? I don't want to end up like this. And I just felt like there's something wrong with this picture. This, like, what is this concept? It's like a problem, let's medicate it, a problem, let's medicate it. And I was just kind of confused. I was like, what is happening? This can't be how it should be. So I came across the book, The Paleo Diet Solution by Rob Wolf. And it's basically about eating real food and how the processed food industry and big food and all that, just basically everything that we were taught, like flip it on its head, don't eat 11 servings of grain in a day, don't avoid salt, don't avoid saturated fat. It's like, oh my goodness, I was doing everything wrong. And meanwhile, here I am trying to, eat whole wheat bread and, granola bars and low fat, SnackWells. And it's like, that was contributing to my problems. So I found the paleo diet and I basically got rid of all the processed food. And for me, I was sensitive to dairy. So I got rid of dairy, and effortlessly, all my allergies went away. All my asthma went away. I never got a sinus infection again. It was like a miracle.
Crazy.
And
Yeah.
so yeah. And so I was just so bought in because I was like, food is so powerful. Food is medicine. Food can heal us. And of course, I wanted to shout this from the rooftops.
Yes.
I was like, oh my gosh, everything we've learned is wrong. So, you have all those early conversations with people who don't want to hear it. I mean, one of my exes threw bread at me and told me I was in a cult because I wouldn't eat gluten. I mean, so, there was some pushback. There were some, people who didn't really want to listen at that point, but now, things have changed and now people will listen to me and want to, so which is great because I'm so passionate about this stuff and I love to share it with people who want to listen. So things were going great. And then I had a really stressful year and I started to put on weight and I started to feel fatigue again. And then my period was late and I didn't get a period for 6 months. I had always struggled with acne, but now my acne, as I was getting into like my mid-20s, was getting worse. And I was like, I thought this was supposed to be getting better. And it was not only cyclical with my periods, but now it was like all the time. It was on my forehead. It was on my cheeks. I'm like, what is happening? Gaining weight. And I was doing the same thing. I didn't change anything. And all of a sudden things were not going well. So I feel like I was, welcomed into the wonderful world of female hormones. And as it turns out, I, looked up online and all my symptoms were showing that I had PCOS. So I was looking at the advice for PCOS out there and they're like, don't eat refined sugar, don't have dairy, don't have gluten. I'm like, check. I'm like, oh, I'm doing all these things. Let me just paleo harder. Obviously it didn't work. So I wasn't getting any results because nothing changed because nothing changed. So I went to a doctor and I was like, let me just try the pharmaceutical route because nothing I'm doing is working. I mean, I was trying to take like Vitex and things like that, but saw palmetto, none of those little things were helping. And so I went to a doctor, to a gynecologist, and I said, I think I have PCOS. I can't lose weight no matter what I do. And I'm just stumped. And he's like, you have PCOS, you have to lose weight. There's no cure and you have to take the pill.
Oh my gosh. Oh, and that's the answer from every gynecologist and doctor, isn't it?
You have to take the pill. And I was like, I'm not going to take that. I had a really bad reaction to the pill many times. I've tried all different ones. And he's like, well, you have to take it. He made me walk out of the office with the prescription. I just ripped it up when I got in the car. I'm like, I'm not going to take that. Thank you anyway. And I was extra motivated when I got out there. I was like, this is not reversible. I'll show you.
Screw
Like,
you. Yeah.
yeah.
I'll show you.
Yeah. So I did end up going on metformin and spironolactone for a short amount of time. And I did see some relief to my symptoms. Of course, you put someone with PCOS on a blood sugar medication that should have been my indication there, but it wasn't because I didn't know anything about blood sugar.
And maybe can you just tell us the tie actually between blood sugar and PCOS, just so people
I'm
understand.
Getting to that.
Oh, okay, great.
I will get to that. Yeah. So, so that comes next. So I wasn't really, I got off the medications because I'm like, I don't want to be on these the rest of my life. And I was kind of, managing at that point. And I was always still, listening to podcasts and trying to figure this out. And so I was listening to a podcast and by Dr. Jason Fung and Megan Ramos. And Megan said, PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I nearly drove my car off the road. I was like, what do you mean diabetes? I know that has to do with blood sugar, but I don't really know what. I don't really know what blood sugar means or is. I know something about my patients used to have amputations, and that was all I knew about diabetes. That was the only thing I knew. So of course, when I got back home, I was like, I need to look into blood sugar. And I ended up going to nutritional therapy school shortly after that, and needed to dive into this a little bit deeper. But what happens is that when you have blood sugar issues, you can develop insulin resistance, which we can go into, and the insulin causes a rise in these androgens in women. If I'm not mistaken, it causes a rise in estrogen in men. It aromatizes the testosterone, so they get high estrogen, and women can get high testosterone. And so that's when I realized that was the connection, that was the root cause. That was why I wasn't making a dent trying to fix my sex hormones. I was missing what was at the bottom of it. So I would only make these tiny, tiny improvements. And without realizing all this insulin resistance was going on, when I finally addressed that and reversed it, my PCOS went away. My periods are like clockwork. I don't have acne anymore. I don't have any symptoms of PMS anymore, which is crazy. I didn't know that you could not have, like, I get a little notification on my phone. It just happened today. It's like, your next cycle is about to begin. I'm like, oh, really? Like I used to have terrible, like, breast tenderness and bloating before my cycle and PMDD and emotional. I mean, I was a different person, and I feel like I don't even know when my period's coming because I don't get symptoms, and it's crazy. So crazy. So yeah.
I love it. Explain. I do want you to explain insulin resistance.
Sure.
Because I want your opinion on Jason and Megan. I've interviewed Megan on my podcast, and
I need to interview her on mine.
She's great.
Because she changed my life.
Awesome. Yeah, she's awesome. Yeah. I couldn't never get Jason though. I've tried several times. I couldn't get him on my podcast, but his theory behind what insulin resistance is different than the mainstream medical interpretation of it. Like the mainstream, it's that it gets full. The cells are full. Or is that his theory? I can't remember. That's his. It's full.
Because he talks about the suitcases and the shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so let's go into that.
That's partially what's happening. So essentially, when we eat carbohydrates and sugar, and even sometimes protein has an insulinogenic effect. It's a smaller effect than carbohydrates. Or when we're stressed and we have the body, the sympathetic nervous system creates glucose. So we get these rises in the sugar in our blood. The body, the pancreas will sense the rise in blood sugar and release this hormone called insulin. And insulin's job is to escort the glucose into the cells of the body so it can be used as fuel, or it could be stored for later, and it gets stored as body fat. So insulin is like the key that opens the locks of the cells to put the sugar in. If it's just in our blood, it's not doing anything for us, but the body likes to have a small amount there, just that like Goldilocks position, not too much, not too little, just about a teaspoon per, circulating at all time for this fast fuel. So that's where we get that concept of balanced blood sugar. We want it to be in this nice tight range. So then once it goes a little bit up, then we get the insulin, and the insulin is going to take some of that sugar out of the blood, put it into the cells. Now we get energy. But with our very modern society of high carbs all the time, low fat. We lived through the 80s and 90s. You know, we've certainly done low fat. And the constant spikes of the sugar, we're stressed out. We, you know, get in an argument, there's taxes, there's, you know, a pandemic. We're just, you know, we might have a snack, we're going to graze. We were told, you know, eat 6 small meals, and we're, you know, just walking through the kitchen, like we're stress eating. So our blood sugar is going up all the time, right? And so the blood sugar comes down quickly, but the insulin doesn't come down quite as quickly. So the insulin insulin levels start to rise over time, and high insulin in the blood almost immediately leads to some sort of resistance. And this is where the cells are just not really responding to the insulin as much as it was before. So that would be like if I put on a shirt that has an itchy tag on it, maybe it's going to itch me for like a few seconds, but then I kind of get used to it, right? We have resistance to that. If I listen to loud music on my earphones and I'm like, oh, there's, you know, a lawnmower outside, and I turn it up, and then there's, you know, birds and whatever, and I turn up my volume, and then I pause the music because someone comes in, I talk to them, I put my headphones back in, I press play. What's going to happen? It's going to be like, oh, that was so loud, right? Because our ears had developed resistance. It wasn't too loud when we were listening to it earlier. So the body develops resistance very quickly to things. So there is also, you know, what happens in type 2 diabetes when the sugar is going up all the time and all the time, the cells do get full. So then that's where giving insulin to a type 2 diabetic, you're still trying to stuff the cells filled, like that are already overflowing with fat, and you're trying to get more and more and more in there, and that's damaging too. But in the earlier stages, it's more like the sensors on the cells are just like, you were already here, like I'm over this, you know, like no occupancy, like we've done this before. So once the cells stop responding to insulin, then the cell could be lacking in energy because it's not getting the energy inside. So you might feel tired all the time. That's a very common symptom. And then you might also feel hungry because your body is not getting nourished, right? So we tend to have this heightened, you know, belly fat. We see hormone imbalances. We see hunger. We see fatigue. We see this constant needing to snack. And it's like, I just need something sweet. Like we're drawn towards sweets because the body is craving sugar. But when you have the resistance to the insulin, the sugar can't get where it needs to go. And it takes sometimes years for the blood sugar levels to go up, but the insulin is already, and the insulin resistance is already brewing for years. But doctors don't test for this. They don't test fasting insulin. So, and a lot of times I have so many clients, I can't even tell you how many tell me, I asked my doctor for a fasting insulin test and he said no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no? What do you mean no? Is it like, aren't you going there to learn about your health? It's like, what, they're holding your health under lock and key, like you can't know about it. Personally, I think it's because they don't know how to interpret the test. They don't know what to do with that information, and they can't give you a prescription for it because there is no prescription for insulin resistance. So yeah, that's a little bit about it. That's my interpretation.
So it's a little bit of both then. Like Jason kind of said, it was more about it being full, and then medical, like mainstream medical will say that it just resists because it gets fatigued, because you keep hammering it, the receptors.
So I mean, things like, yeah. So things like vegetable oil. So like canola, soybean, cottonseed, safflower, sunflower, rapeseed, grapeseed oil, those oils, not olive oil, not avocado oil. These vegetable oils, which are not even made of vegetables, they actually inflame the receptor sites for insulin. So they directly cause insulin resistance. So that is like step one, get those out of your diet. Step one, read every single ingredient, every single thing that you turn that label over and look for those oils, because
it's almost impossible to find.
Yeah.
At least
go out
like
to eat.
Created like recipe products, like where they've got multiple things in it. It's almost impossible to find something, even in health food stores. Yeah. 99% of them have canola oil, soy oil,
or like sunflower. They're putting in everything now because people are catching on. So they'll be like expeller pressed rapeseed oil. That is canola oil. They use a different name for it, or they'll put like something soya. It's like, we still know what it means, like they're trying to change the name of it, or like, let's use sunflower oil because they haven't caught on to that yet. So they keep trying to manipulate it, and people are catching on, not soon enough, but it's definitely something to be really mindful of. And also when you go out to eat, they're always cooking in these oils. Even you go to a restaurant. My wife used to work in an Italian restaurant, bottles of olive oil, 80% olive oil, 20% vegetable oil. I'm like, you even go and you ask for olive oil and you're getting some vegetable oil still, because they cut it with that because it's cheaper. And so it's really hard to avoid these oils completely. So, cooking from home is always going to be your best investment in your health. And like, it is really worth it to spend the extra on something. Even like Primal Kitchen products are made with avocado oil instead, making your own from scratch, like making your own dressings, making your own mayo, super easy to, throw an egg, pour in the avocado oil with an immersion blender, and it just emulsifies. I mean, 2 ingredients. It's so easy. So a lot of these things you could do at home to keep you away from those vegetable oils. So
recently my daughter was making this packaged brownie mixture that she got for Christmas from her grandma. Anyways, it calls for a half a cup of vegetable oil, right? So I was so happy with this. My daughter's 15. And so she says, I need vegetable oil, Mom, because we never ever have it in the house. In her whole lifetime, we've never had it in the house. So I had to go out and buy this canola oil, which just made me cringe. But we only have like this little tiny local little grocery store that has very minimal stuff in it. Like they don't have olive oil. They don't have, and then town is like a half an hour away. So we just had to go to the local store and get what we could. So I get the vegetable oil, I bring it home, and she's like, Mom, this is canola oil. This isn't vegetable oil. Like, she just has no idea, right? I'm like, it's all the same. Just use it. It's terrible for you. Just go ahead. But I was proud of that. I was like, I'm glad that my kid doesn't know what canola oil is.
Yeah. And like my mom will say that she'll only use it when she's making brownies. I'm like, well, or cookies or something for, people in her office. I'm like, well, just use avocado oil. You can switch it. Yeah. Or butter. Yeah. Don't add insult to injury. Yeah, for sure.
And have you heard, I can't remember what the exact number was, but how long it takes for the vegetable oil to get out of your body? I've heard it's like 6 months or something, or like,
I think it's longer than that. I think it's like over several years or something. It incorporates into your body fat. And then when you are, we're supposed to be able to burn our body fat for fuel, like between meals, or if we're sleeping and we're not eating. And this can block a lot of people's ability to properly utilize their body fat, because the body fat is toxic and it's made with these rancid oils. And I was reading about that in Kate Shanahan's book called The Fat Burn
that's
Effects.
where I got it. I was just going to say it was from Kate Shanahan.
Yeah. And so she talks about how it really can mess with your body's ability to burn its own body fat. And then you get the insulin resistance from the vegetable oils, and then you can't burn body fat. So these vegetable oils really drive you towards carbohydrates, because your body is looking for energy it can use. And so it's a lot of times the cravings that we have and these tendencies towards carbs and sugar and having the sweet tooth is really due to the physiology. And it's not solely due to these, emotional connections or stress eating. Sometimes it's a physiological need. Our blood sugar is dropping. You can't easily burn body fat for fuel because you have insulin resistance, which insulin blocks fat burning. So that's the connection there. So insulin, you have high insulin levels in your blood. That tells the body to be storing everything, store fat, store sugar, store. So when you have the high insulin levels, you can't burn fat at the same time you're storing it. So the insulin levels block fat burn. So then you're out of fuel. It blocks you from accessing your body fuel. So if you have extra body fat and you have no energy, with all this body fat on you is stored energy. So if you have no energy, yet you're storing it in your body, it to me, it's saying you can't access it. And that insulin could be a huge piece of this puzzle, that if we bring those insulin levels down, you might be able to then access your body fat and burn it. So then you're not dependent on a constant stream of carbohydrates and sugar to keep your energy up. Because if you're doing that too, you raise the blood sugar, but then you get the insulin spike and the blood sugar goes back down. So you need more. So it puts you, if you're fueling on carbohydrates mostly and very low fat, it puts you on this blood sugar roller coaster, because the blood sugar will go up and then it will go down. And then once you're going down, that's when you start to get these symptoms of, you might get anxious, you might get shaky, dizzy, hangry, irritable. You feel urgent hunger, you get cravings for things, you feel dizzy, lightheaded, brain fog, difficulty concentrating. And all of those symptoms are not, when those symptoms are paired with hunger, and you have that urgent hunger, that's a blood sugar crash. That's a blood sugar low, or it's going low. And that is not a sign of healthy hunger. That's a sign that your body is getting into this danger zone. It's almost like the gas light came on in your car. And those are the symptoms. And what are those symptoms going to do? They're going to drive you to go get fast fuel. And what is fast fuel? The fastest fuel is carbohydrates, especially in the refined form. We're going to grab a Gatorade, we're going to grab an energy drink, we're going to grab a Starbucks, we're going to get, a granola bar, or like grab, I don't know what normal people eat anymore because I'm so in my world, but like a handful of, even just an apple, and people are thinking like, oh, I'm going to have a fruit because that's a healthy snack, but you have a fruit by itself with nothing else, and you're going to get a blood sugar spike, and then it's going to go down. It's going to keep perpetuating this blood sugar roller coaster of the ups and downs. And when we talk about the balanced blood sugar, that's the opposite of what we want. We don't want big peaks and valleys. We want it to be like little rolling hills, staying in a really tight range. And that tight range is what brings us all the benefits of balanced blood sugar, where we feel energized, we don't feel cravings, we don't feel hungry, our hormones can be balanced. Like, this is where our body loves to be. But the other piece is where you start to get all those symptoms, like I talked about earlier. And then over time, those symptoms start progressing and start hitting more body areas. Because remember, every single cell in the body has receptors for blood sugar and insulin, because it is a fuel for every cell. Therefore, issues with blood sugar and insulin affect every cell, every organ, and every physiological process in the body. So you can go from head to toe and list off all the issues that high sugar and insulin can cause you, like the eyes. We get the diabetics have the highest rate of macular degeneration. Our brain, maybe I should have started there. Diabetes, Alzheimer's is being called type 3 diabetes. We get memory issues, brain fog, mood issues, depression, anxiety. We know that sugar causes issues with our teeth and gum decay. We know that it leads to acne and wrinkles. It causes heart issues, diabetes, insulin resistance, causes high blood pressure. That's very common. It causes all sorts of cardiovascular issues. Like, you can just keep going down the line, and you'll see it impacts every single area. And then all the physiological processes. So like energy and sleep and our moods and just detoxification, digestion, it affects everything. So we'll see the symptoms start to be more diverse, and then it starts to affect these other symptoms. So other systems. So you'll get hormone issues, or you'll develop, digestive stuff and autoimmunity, and maybe candida and dysbiosis. So it's affecting the gut in those areas. And then it might be where it hits you genetically. I was someone, I had ear, nose, throat stuff, right? Some people get joint pain. Some people, it affects their, all different stuff. Fertility.
Your allergies, like you had such severe allergies, and that would have been from that. That's crazy. So you were doing paleo, which for a lot of people that would correct insulin resistance. That would be enough.
Do you know what my paleo looked like?
Yeah, I was going to say, what were you doing wrong with your paleo?
Okay. So my sweet tooth from the standard American diet just transferred to paleo. So I thought, because it was fruit and maple syrup and honey and coconut sugar, that it was healthy sugar, because that's what I was told. So breakfast, I mean, I would blend a half a banana in my iced coffee and put coconut milk in it. I had smoothies, acai bowls. I had sweet potatoes all the time, plantains, plantain chips, store-bought
Plantains are
kombucha.
insanely high in sugar.
They are, yeah, and they're
Yeah,
so
like,
delicious.
so
And I would eat a
delicious.
whole one at one time. That was my starch at the meal, you know? So what I think had happened was that I feel like I kind of managed okay in the past because I did do low fat, because fat and carbs are an energy source, right? And so you don't want both of those to be high, because then you get that excess energy, because when you spike the insulin from the carbs, and then there's a lot of insulin, and then you eat a lot of fat, now it's also storing that. So I think that was part of the problem, that with paleo, I increased my fats because I wasn't afraid of fat anymore. I wasn't eating chicken breast and like trimming the fat and, just spraying the pan with a little bit of Pam. I was doing like, some ghee and chicken thighs with the skin on, and, going out of my way to have fats. And then I thought I had the green light to eat as many healthy carbs as I want, and paleo treats and, carbs all the time. And I wasn't thinking, I never thought about the word carbohydrate when I did paleo. I mean, this was 2012, so carbs weren't on the scene yet.
Yeah. Right.
So I just had way too many for my biology. And so what I did was I took my paleo diet and I changed it to ketogenic macros when I found out that I had PCOS, and when I realized I had the insulin resistance. And I basically just took out all those paleo carb sources and added in some more fats. So it was all whole foods, and I dropped weight immediately. I got rid of my acne within a week, never came back. My periods took about 4 to 5 months to see any difference, but I attribute that to this trickle down effect, where we have to normalize the blood sugar and the insulin first. Everything's trying to balance. And finally, 4 or 5 months in, my periods were getting better. I wasn't having symptoms. And then they just started coming regularly, and all of the PCOS symptoms completely went away. I stayed doing keto, and I did some fasting as well for about a year and a half, 2 years-ish. And then it was right after my wedding, and I was just like, I feel like I need some carbohydrates. And so I started adding in some of those
because why? Just intuitively, or did something happen?
It was intuitively. I was just like, I feel like I didn't crave carbohydrates. So I'm like, I feel like my body's just telling me that I need this. And so the weather was starting to get warmer, and I just started adding in some like berries and some more paleo type carbohydrates. So all real food, whole food carbohydrates. And I was doing great with them, and I would cycle them in, and I'm like, wow, I feel like I can tolerate these. I feel like I'm needing them. And I feel like nothing's changing. My PCOS isn't coming back. I'm like, I don't have cravings anymore. So I had tried to do some carb ups in there, because it's very important, especially before the menstrual cycle, even if you're in ketosis, to add in carbohydrates and not fast that week. But I still struggled with a lot of cravings. And so it took me a while to be able to even do a carb up. And I just wasn't there because I didn't have that control. I felt like I needed to be on this really high fat diet, very low carb diet for a while. And then it just kind of naturally, like my body's like, you're ready. And I was like, you can have these again. And so I added them in, and it's totally different. So I feel like my body is the exact same now, like that it was when I was on keto while I'm having the carbs. So I almost feel like I can have my carbs and eat them too, It's like I'm getting the best of both worlds, because now my body can tolerate it. So one way of looking at insulin resistance is that it is a state of carbohydrate intolerance. So if you think about it in that sense, my body was not able to tolerate all those carbohydrates. So I had to get the insulin down. I did a lot of work on my digestion and my adrenals after I went to nutrition school too. And, optimizing a lot of different things, not just diet, a lot of lifestyle stuff. And then I feel like I could add in those carbohydrates in a healthy amount. And I also use certain hacks to make sure that my glucose isn't spiking a lot after I'm eating. And by doing that, I feel like I have so much more leeway in what I can eat. And I feel like it benefits my energy levels, whereas before it was taking away. So I think that with carbohydrates, the point is not to demonize them, but it's to find the amount that works for you at that time and stay open and stay flexible and see when that needs to change. Because there's certain times, like we're so cyclical as women, every month we have a cycle. And then the earth goes through cycles. And so, in the middle of, I live in Florida. So, Florida summers, it's not really biologically appropriate to be keto. There would have been a ton of, fruits and things around. And so leaning into that, maybe in the winter time, people want to maybe lean more into like broths and stews and lower carb. I find that my body doesn't feel good doing that right now. So I don't do that. And I'm okay with that. I don't have to, I'm not married to keto. I'm not married to fasting. And what I am married to is identifying what I feel like my body needs and honoring that and experimenting, because I'm not always going to get it right, but learning from each experience. So some days I might be like, it's too late to eat dinner, I'm going to skip dinner. And then I feel cold at night. I'm like, it's because I didn't eat, because it's affecting my thyroid. And so I'm like, okay, next time I'm going to be more prepared and know that my body doesn't want to fast right now. Cool. Good to know. It's not judging my body for where it's at, because I know that my adrenals are a little shot from overworking. So that's also a thing.
Me too.
So, yeah.
So in your practice, because you've worked with thousands of women probably at this point, or hundreds, with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And men too. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you find that most of your clients have to go into ketosis and follow the ketogenic diet to start with? Or do you find that some people actually do okay more on a kind of a true blue paleo diet, or even a little bit of grains in there? Like, what are you seeing with your clinical experience?
Yeah. So what I see is that not everyone needs to do ketosis to set out to like do a ketogenic diet, because we all have a very specific picture of what that is in our head. But I do feel that accelerates people's progress. And as soon as they're able to tolerate some carbohydrate, for women, I will have them add in carbohydrates at specific times in their menstrual cycle. So around ovulation, and then right before the cycle, to build up progesterone and make sure we're not fasting. If women are postmenopausal, we also will ask them, and this is based on the work of Dr. Mindy Pelz, who does, she has the Menopause Reset, and she recommends that women come out of ketosis if they're postmenopausal 10 to 20% of the time. So at least coming out and doing these regular cycles. I find that doing keto for too long for women is not beneficial. It will have a benefit and it will keep going up. It will reach its maximal benefit and then it will start declining. So I feel like I caught mine right at the very top. I'm like, you know what? I just feel like I need it. I was getting cold when I was like fasting, and that was really it. And my hair started to thin a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need some carbs. And so I started putting those back in. But yeah, so I find that it accelerates the progress. And I work with a lot of people with a lot of difficulty giving up sugar and carbohydrates. And having been there myself, I don't think it would have been possible for me to moderate carbohydrates.
Yep.
And some of us can't moderate. I couldn't even have raspberries. I couldn't have stevia. It just totally woke up my sugar dragon. My sugar dragon was like, I smell sugar. I smell stevia. It's like, maybe we should get some carbs. Maybe you need some more dark chocolate. Maybe you can, and I couldn't get rid of that. So I found that it was so freeing and liberating and did its job. The other thing is that I don't recommend people do that right off the bat. So I have a blood sugar diet roadmap that I use in my program. And step one is going from what I call these level 1 diets, which might be a standard American diet, a conscious standard American diet, which was what I was kind of on, like whole wheat. And, you try to use like low fat and things like that. Anyone who's on a low fat diet, who's dabbled with, dirty keto, who's kind of done yo-yo dieting, all sorts of like no label of a diet, those are all level 1. And I say that the goal is to get to a real food diet. So we're going to get out the processed foods. We're going to start cooking our food. And for some people, it's amazing. That's all they needed, right? Some people need to go deeper. And then so we'll take that real food diet and we'll take out some grains and we'll take out the starches, and then we'll do more of ketogenic type macros, get them producing ketones, because when the body can become keto adapted, it learns how to become fat adapted. And you want that fat adaptation where it can burn its own body fat for fuel. That's really freeing. It's really healing on the hormones. And then come out of that, like I said, when you can cycle in and out of it. And that I feel like is a really sweet spot for a lot of people. And so people need different levels, but it's never like the goal is to get to ketosis and stay there. I really look at it as a therapeutic healing protocol that a lot of people do benefit from, but then a lot of people get too attached to something that made them feel good at one time. And they think, well, this worked for me at one point, so it has to be working now. So it's probably something else that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did with paleo. So if you can learn anything from this, just don't get so attached to your diet that you can't see outside of it. Because when you are paleo, when you are keto, you are attaching your identity to your diet, and your needs might change. And then you are blinded to the answers, to the solutions. And so stay flexible, stay open, and you don't have to adopt a certain diet. And you might, again, if you lower your carbs and you raise your fats a little and you use blood sugar hacks, you might be able to eat some starchy vegetables and some grains and be in ketosis. So it's like ketosis is a natural state for the body to go in. But again, it's a little bit of like, I think of it as like a hormetic stressor, just like fasting, just like exercise. So it's like, we want to push the body a little bit, but so it adapts and gets stronger. So if you're pushing it and it's like, that was way too much, it could be like the domino that makes everything fall. So, but I see a lot of really, really good benefits from people being on a ketogenic diet, and the way that I teach it too. And it's not about counting and micromanaging and weighing and all that stress.
Stress, exactly. Yeah.
I can never do that. No way.
I'm so glad you said all that, because that's been my experience as well. My clinical experience is that it's like this miracle diet when women first started. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's corrected all these problems and I'm finally able to lose weight and I feel so amazing. And then these little symptoms start creeping up, and their solution to it, because they identify now with being on a ketogenic diet, and they're in all the groups and they're following all the keto gurus. And it's like, this is who I am. I am a person that is in ketosis,
Right. And God forbid you're not making ketones. It's like, oh no, there's something wrong. I'm not making ketones. It feels like there's something bad happening.
Yeah. And it's like you feel like you're cheating on yourself and who you are and what you stand for. Right.
Yes.
It's just as harsh as the vegans, right? Vegans are the same way. It's like tunnel vision until it stops working for them. But then they just think they need to do it harder. And that's with ketosis, is they'll then just think, okay,
maybe I need to do carnivore.
Need to go. That's always the next step. Carnivore and then OMAD. One meal a day, carnivore. And
no OMAD for my women. No, don't do it.
Don't, please.
Don't do it. Yeah. And I really like, one of the things, how my teaching has evolved over time, I haven't been doing this for too long, but even just things that I'm learning. I mean, I have so many people who come to me on a carnivore diet and it's like, they're not getting the benefits that they used to, and their blood sugar is going up. I'm like, do you know what you need? Carbohydrates. And they're like, what? I'm like, yep, we're going to start carb cycling. No. And they're like, really? I can? I'm like, yes.
Well, I have people get mad at me.
Oh, really? I have people
Yeah.
so relieved, and they're so relieved that they can do this. And they're like, I feel so much better. I finally had a period that was so much better. I'm like, yes, because you are a woman and like and most of my clients are women. I do work with men too, but I tend to attract women. I don't know. Maybe it's my messaging. People are like, would you ever consider working with a man? I'm like, dudes are way easier. They don't have a pesky menstrual cycle. I'm
Exactly.
like, of course,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I get
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah. Right.
People say,
Like,
can you see my husband? Do you see
yeah.
men? I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, do I ever? Because they're
Yeah.
so much easier.
They're
And
so
like, they don't
easy.
need they
You
need
don't have,
half the amount of time from me. So
yeah,
here's what you have to do. And they're
just
like,
do this
oh,
one thing
20
and
pounds in
right.
1 week and insulin sensitive, just like that.
Yeah, exactly. I have clients and I'll work with a wife and she's like, oh, I told my husband to do some of the stuff that you told me. And he's already lost 20 pounds and
Yeah.
I've only lost 4. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I can't
So not
do
fair.
anything about that. So yeah, we have it harder. We
Yes.
do,
So
but
what
I think
I
it makes
found
us stronger.
interesting was on in your Instagram that I was checking out, you
Yeah.
talk a lot about the different proteins that are better to stabilize blood sugar. And I thought that was super interesting because
Yeah.
you say things like chicken breast will raise blood sugar, but not a chicken thigh. And I'm like, this to me makes so much sense because I find if I ate a steak, I'm so satisfied, full for hours. If I eat a chicken breast, literally like 30 minutes later, I'm hungry
Starving.
again.
Yeah.
And I have very sensitive blood sugar, always have. I was the person just like you who, thought, pack the granola bar in the purse at all times in case my blood sugar crashes.
Yep.
I would never leave the house without food in my purse until I went paleo and that stabilized my blood sugar. But
yeah.
so tell me about talk about why that is. That's just crazy to me.
Yeah. So, like I was mentioning earlier, every macronutrient, so there's proteins, carbs, and fats. Macronutrients have an effect on blood sugar and also insulin levels. And the thing about the proteins, what sets them apart is honestly how much fat they have. So the fat stabilizes the blood sugar because it takes longer to digest, longer for the sugar to go out into our blood. So it helps to keep the sugar at like a slow trickle. So then you almost don't even notice it coming out and we don't get that big spike, which we want to avoid. So when we have protein that's very lean, like chicken breast, tuna, like white tuna, protein powders, egg whites, just having the whites without the yolks. If you notice, protein in nature is almost always packaged with fat. They come together because they help the digestion of each other. They're supposed to go together. So when you have a whole animal and we're cutting around to just suck out the breast, take off the skin, take off the fat, that's not how nature intended it, right? So if you eat just that, it will raise your blood sugar somewhat. The protein converts to glucose in a process called gluconeogenesis. This is a demand-driven process. So if your body doesn't need the sugar, it might not convert it. It might use it might use all the amino acids and whatever, but your body can't store excess amino acids, which comes from protein. So the body has to convert it to sugar in order to store it as body fat. So that's where you get a lot of people who are doing a super high protein diet and really low carbs and low fat, and they're not doing well. Their blood sugar will go up. They have energy crashes because it's almost like they're eating a higher carb diet, a low fat, high carb diet, because all this protein is converting to sugar. So it's not to say that like, oh my gosh, I had some chicken breasts on my salad, like it's going to spike my blood sugar. That's not how it works. But I find this to be especially relevant in people who have a condition called reactive hypoglycemia. And this is not so much a condition as just a manifestation of blood sugar dysregulation and insulin resistance in people. And also there's always the presence of poor adrenal function, HPA axis dysfunction, adrenal fatigue, whatever you want to call it. And their blood sugar, they can't keep it up. And so what happens is that they're told the recommendation for them is to eat high protein and complex carbohydrates, and this will only create a spike. And so in the keto world, if you notice, they'll say eat fatty cuts of meat, and the fattier cuts of meat will keep you full and satiated and keep your blood sugar stable. So the fat is really what is helping us get from meal to meal. Protein is the most satiating macronutrient, but fat helps us to stabilize. And also it's like a low burning, slow burning fuel. Think about it as like a log in a fire. It's going to burn all night. Think about carbs as like the kindling, right? It burns hot and fast and then it's done. So you're out. So when you're planning a meal, if you want to make a blood sugar stable meal, we always want to think of protein because protein is essential, but we also want to think about fat with the protein. And that doesn't mean like, let's pour a pound of olive oil on the top. Like, no, get the protein that is packaged with fat in nature. So get the fattier cuts, get the chicken thighs with the skin on, because this is going to hold you over so much longer. I know that if I eat a meal, even if I put extra fats on my plate, if I eat like a white fish or like even sometimes chicken for me is like still pretty lean, or like a lean pork chop or something, I will be hungry like within a few hours. And it's like, no matter how much fat I put on the plate, it just makes me hungrier because it's just not carrying me that long. And then I do see a small little blip on my continuous blood sugar meter. So it is contributing to some sort of blood sugar response. And it's very relevant for people who have this reactive hypoglycemia where their blood sugar is always crashing, which is way more common than we realize. These are the people with the granola bars in their purse, or like me, where I had to eat before I went out to eat because it would take too long. I was like, why am I like this? Yeah. So, and I had a kind of a mild form, but, I have clients who can't hold a job. They can't drive. They have seizures. They are passing out. They can't be alone with their kids. It's debilitating. It is absolutely, there's always tears. I'm always crying. It's crazy and the advice out there is so bad. And what these people need, they need fat. They need fat to stabilize their blood sugar. And if you notice in the recommendations, they're told protein and complex carbs. Where's the talk of fat? Fat is the answer. Fat is your friend. Fat will stabilize you and it will help blunt that insulin response, give you this slow drip of the blood sugar. Because what's happening oftentimes in these reactive hypoglycemic people is that they get too big of an insulin spike and it puts away too much sugar. And then you're super low. Then you go really low. But reactive hypoglycemia can happen. The feelings of it can happen in any blood sugar range, because if the body can't burn fat for fuel, if there's this high insulin around, the body's going to be like, we are close to empty, like we are running low, even though your blood sugar might be 90 or 100, which is high. So then you get gaslighting from doctors who are saying like, no, you don't have hypoglycemia. Your blood sugar is 90. And they're like, I feel terrible. They're shaking, they're dizzy, they're going to pass out and they feel like they're going to die. And the doctor's like, you know what you need? You need an anxiety medication. And then it doesn't get addressed and they feel crazy and they just keep eating more frequently because that's what they're told to do. You go to a regular nutritionist, like a classically trained dietitian, they're going to tell you eat more carbs more frequently. And what is that going to do to our blood sugar? It's going to exacerbate, it's going to worsen the root cause of the issue. And then the person's going to go on and develop type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes or diabetes. So it's pretty rough. That's why we need fats. Literally, that's like healthy fats. They will save you.
But not too much. Like I think people, and you talk about a lot about this too, is people following a ketogenic diet. I find it's either they're way overdoing the fat and they're eating fat bombs all day long and like drinking bulletproof coffee all day long and like fat on everything. And they're going, why am I not losing weight? You know, because they're eating 2,000 calories worth of freaking fat bombs every day. And then the other group is that they're not doing enough fat and they're following this super lean ketogenic diet and wondering the same thing, like, why am I hungry all the time? Why am I getting shaky? Why,
Yeah. And it's that they're not getting into ketosis. So at the beginning with a ketogenic diet, I do recommend doing a higher fat approach. This doesn't mean, fat bombs and bulletproof coffee all day, because you also want, that's like a lot of like butter and MCT oil. And while they do have, butter has nutrients, not a ton, right? So we want to think about getting fat from our foods, like nutrient dense sources. So avocados and olives and coconut and the fats from our fatty meats. And then once you do get into ketosis, then that's when you have to start increasing the protein, because that's another problem, that women will be very protein deficient because they're doing too high fat. Protein is so, so important, and it will prevent some people from getting into ketosis initially because it does have that blood sugar response, right? But as soon as you can, as soon as your body's like, oh yeah, I got this keto thing, that's when you start increasing the protein again. And that's going to be that really important macronutrient. And you want to fill with fats, like just enough that you need to keep yourself stable, making it to the next meal, feeling full, keeping your blood sugar balanced, and then, cycle in those carbohydrates wherever that fits for you in your journey. So that's I don't have a one size fits all recommendation at all for anyone. So it's not like, should I do keto? I'm like, I don't know. And definitely don't do it if you're coming from a standard American diet. Like a lot of people experience, well, first off, the electrolytes are a big thing. That's something easy to Google. But lesser known is that a lot of people, their gallbladder is not ready for all this fat. Their stomach acid is not sufficient enough for all the protein. And so you get a lot of these digestive issues that can happen. And then people without a gallbladder are trying keto. And it's like, we need to have this, bile replacement. If we're there, we need to start using certain supplements and foods to thin the bile and get this bile flowing again. So if you're starting from a really low fat diet, you want to slowly ramp up your fats. You don't want to be like, oh, Dani told me I need a lot of fat, so I'm just going to, eat a whole avocado and a ribeye. Like, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Don't do that. You're not ready for it. So, optimizing digestion in that way, making sure you're sitting, chewing thoroughly in a rest and digest state, maybe some apple cider vinegar if you don't suffer from heartburn, to help to increase that stomach acid. And some of the bile acids can be really, really helpful at first. And it has a benefit of lowering the glucose response of meals as well. So that's like the triple threat. So I feel like I should be sponsored by apple cider vinegar.
Yes, I see you talk about it a lot.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
apple cider vinegar. I have it in my fridge at all times, and I'll make like little cocktails. If I have digestive upset, I'll put baking soda in with apple cider vinegar and do like a shooter, and it's like instant relief in the gut.
Nice.
So I think it's great. Is there what else besides apple cider vinegar? Like, are there certain supplements that you think work better than others when it comes to helping correct insulin resistance and blood sugar problems?
So with insulin resistance, I feel like I use a lot of supplements in my practice with digestion, because a lot of people need those digestive supports, and that is going to help us extract the most nutrients out of our food, because that is where we get nutrients from. Nutrients drive every single process in the body. So, and then we have to also break down the food properly in order to have a gut that is ready to accept these nutrients, right? So if we don't break down the food well, it's going to get to the gut, and it's going to be these hunks of undigested food, and potentially with like pathogens and things, because the stomach acid didn't sanitize, like didn't, what's the word I'm looking for? Like sterilize it, right? So then the gut is it's ready for individual nutrients, like a little amino acid, a little zinc. And instead it's getting a hunk of chicken, and it's like, what the heck is this? And so it's going to affect the cilia in there. It's going to kind of shave those down. And then we're going to have leaky gut. The gut lining is going to be compromised. It's only one cell wall thick. So if we don't break down our food right, we will never heal our gut. And that's what so many people miss. That is like the biggest thing. Everyone's like, I take a probiotic. It's like, that's at the end of the chain. That's the large intestine. You have the stomach, the pancreas, the gallbladder, the small intestine. All those things have to go first. And your mouth, you have to chew properly 30 times per bite. I'm still working on that. It's been 5 years since nutrition school. I'm still working on my chewing. So don't worry if it takes you a while to get it. But we have to, that's an area where I really like to support. I like to support all these areas with supplements, because our digestive systems are just so beat up from eating, McDonald's and the foods we ate as kids, and gluten, and, we're stressed out. That stops stomach acid production. So we're kind of starting from scratch with the digestive system. But when it comes to insulin resistance, we definitely need things like we need B vitamins, we need minerals like chromium and zinc and copper and all these things. So again, I look back to digestion, like, okay, we could get a lot of these things through our food, make sure we're optimizing digestion first. Berberine is said to help, but I've also heard that apple cider vinegar works just as well as berberine. So you're going to have a lessened blood sugar and insulin response to every single meal you're eating if you have apple cider vinegar right before each meal. And so I feel like that's cheaper than berberine and it helps digestion at the same time. So I feel like it could even be more beneficial. And then there is inositol. So myo and inositol can also help with sensitizing insulin receptors. So this is also really helpful. It says like on the website that I order from, it's like, this is really helpful for women with PCOS. Yeah. And I'm like, yes, because of the insulin. So that's a good one. But there's not a ton of, it's like you want to be getting nutrients, like a really nutrient dense diet. But this is something that really needs to be reversed through diet and lifestyle. So it's exercise is hugely important. I know you talked to Megan Ramos, so fasting can be a tool. Women need to be very careful with fasting. So really listen to your body. If you fast and you're cold, you're tired the next day, you're more hungry, that was too much for you. I also don't love the idea of skipping breakfast. I like the idea of eating during daylight hours where that's when our cortisol is high. That's when we're supposed to like go out and get food. And then you're not supposed to eat a heavy meal right before you go to bed. That's not good for your digestive system. You're supposed to be detoxing in your sleep, not digesting. So eating with the sun can be really helpful. So if you're gonna do fasting, which is great and can be really helpful for a lot of people, think about maybe a skip dinner instead, or like, just not snacking. That's hugely important as well. So just cutting down those snacks if you can. If your blood sugar is crashing, then, come see me. We'll work on that. Not everyone could take out the snacks. And then taking out snacking is not as easy as just willpower, because it comes down to how to build your plate in a way that carries you through, which we kind of mentioned earlier. So making sure you're getting those fats and proteins on the plate, that you can digest them, and that can really take you through to the next meal. So not snacking becomes effortless instead of like white knuckling it.
Yeah, I agree. Because I find even for myself, if I don't eat I don't count macros. So I just look at, I know by looking at my plate, it's like, I know I've got to have some fat in there, not too much. I got to have a little bit of fat. I got to have a protein, and then I got to have a little bit of carbs in some form, right? Whether it's vegetables, or I'm not really a fruit eater, but sweet potato, things like that. So and so how do you recommend, like, what do you recommend people do to help figure this out? Like, do you think everybody should have a CGM, or could we just use the blood sugar monitor, or how we feel? Like, what do you suggest as far as like kind of hacking our own blood sugar, and what tools do you use for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think that symptoms are always going to trump everything. So getting in tune with your body, how does your hunger feel? Do you have these symptoms? Like, what would happen if you had to fast for blood work in the morning? How do you feel, right? Could you do it? My blood sugar was 60 and I felt like I was going to pass out. So that wasn't, that was me when I had PCOS and no one said anything. So I didn't realize that I had these blood sugar issues, right? And, do you need to snack? Do you need to graze? Because sometimes our blood sugar never goes low enough. Sometimes we don't have those symptoms of the shakes and the nausea and the headaches because we missed a meal, because we're intuitively self-medicating. We're grazing all day long. Like, making a salad, throw a little bit of this inside. And, I just walk by and grab some almonds. And are you doing that without realizing, like, how many times a day are you putting something in your mouth? So taking that inventory, looking at your symptoms, looking at your hunger, is your hunger able to be put off, or is it urgent, right? That's step one. I definitely recommend getting a blood sugar meter, because it's inexpensive, easy to use, and a really great metric that you can take at home, that you don't need a doctor to tell you anything about it. And I have some graphs some graphics on my Instagram of like what to look for in terms of fasting blood sugar, because under 100 is not specific enough. That's what they'll use in the doctor's office. I was 60, that was too low, right? What's too low? What's too high? So I have a different range that I use with my clients and for finding optimal. And it's a good measure, a good metric to measure. So testing your fasting blood sugar. And then I also talk about how you can, instead of getting a CGM, which is extremely helpful, if you can get one, because it's so much information, so beneficial. You can learn so much about yourself. But if you don't have access to the CGM, if you can't afford it right now, you can absolutely just take your blood sugar meter and you test right before a meal. You obviously don't do this every day or every meal, but maybe it's a Saturday and you're like, I'm going to test my lunch and see what happens. So you test right before the meal, and then every 20 minutes after you finish. So just set a timer on your phone and just keep track of the numbers, and then you can graph them and you see what happens. If you just check 2 hours after, what could have happened in that time? It could have been a huge spike up to 200, and then it came back down to baseline. So it could have been like 90 and 90. And what's happening in between, it could have like gone up a little bit and crashed, and then maybe it went up again. Like it could be doing all sorts of things. Or ideally, it's staying under a peak of 30 at a meal. So 30-point increase. And it's, just a little hill, maybe not so much showing anything. And then we're right back down to normal. And that's ideal, right? So we want to know what the blood sugar is doing, because this is going to give us a lot of information. And it's also going to give us information of how we feel at these different blood sugar ranges. So sometimes I had a client who said, you know what, as soon as my blood sugar got up to this number where hers peaked around like 120, she's like, that's where I started getting dizzy and I started having cravings. So everyone's going to have a different manifestation. For me, I start to get cravings if I do blood sugar experiments for my CGM. So if I eat what I call naked carbs, so carbs with no fat or protein, which I hate doing for these experiments, as soon as my blood sugar peaks, that's when I start having cravings. It's like, as soon as it gets to this high point, right when it's about to go down, which I find so weird. And then the whole way down is just like craving city. I'm just like, I want to eat something. I hate this experiment. So what that would lead me to believe is that what I probably did in the past was I'd eat something and then I'd get a little hungry and then I'd eat again and I'd eat again. And so it goes up and trends up over time. So it's really helpful to connect this. It's like, oh, I always get this headache. I think it's because my blood sugar is dropping. Wow. Like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. So once you can really be in tune with that, you can start employing different hacks to kind of be able to eat some carbohydrates, but in a way that doesn't affect your blood sugar as much. And you can learn which foods specifically affect your blood sugar the most. So I had a client who spiked to like 140, like 240 from eating a small amount of watermelon. Like that doesn't normally happen. So she was really sensitive to that one food. It didn't happen with like rice, so I find that I react much more to starches. So, sushi rice, especially because it's got the sugar in it too, big spikes from sushi. But if I make rice at home, like basmati is less of a spike than jasmine rice. So there's all different things that, and different factors affect it too. So if you were tired, if you worked out, if you go for a walk afterwards, so there's a lot of different things that are going to affect your blood sugar. So that's why it's also hard to do these experiments, because it's like, you have to do it first thing in the morning. You have to get a good amount of sleep. You can't move around after, because all these things are going to impact the blood sugar. So they'll impact the results.
So I just recently did a CGM experiment myself, and I was given one. So I had one for 2 weeks, and I interviewed the lady that is the dietitian for Nutrisense.
Yes.
And it was interesting. The highest in the 2 weeks that my blood sugar went was when I ate sushi.
Yes.
And she said that was like, she sees it all the time. And what's funny is at some point in those 2 weeks, my husband decided to make homemade donuts this one afternoon. He never does this. So it was like out of left field. It's like, of course I'm going to have a freaking homemade donut. They're huge. I ate a whole donut my blood sugar went up a little bit, came right back down. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, so I can't eat sushi, but I can eat the donut. I just thought it was hilarious. I'm like, goes to show like how much you don't know what's affecting your system, like that you have to pay attention to it. And testing is such a great way to do that. So I'm guessing that that's a lot of what's in your blood sugar mastery program, like teaching people how to do all of this. So tell us a little bit about that program. How long is it? Is it ongoing all the time, or does it have a start date?
So it's an 8-week program. You do have the modules for life. So the coaching lasts 8 weeks. The next round is going to be in late March. I haven't decided on a start date yet. And the program has different modules. We work through that blood sugar diet roadmap. So you can not bite off more than you can chew, because I see a lot of people trying to change every single thing in their life. And it's like, to get from level 1 to level 2, where you're eating a processed food diet to a real food diet, sometimes step 1 is like take out gluten. And that's a step that might last like 5 weeks for some people, because it's difficult to make these changes. So we work on making these changes and setting these small achievable goals to get you going where you need to go. But you have that roadmap. You have, okay, once I cut out this, what am I going to cut out now? What are the foods I'm going to be adding in? We look at different things on labels we should look out for, how to make sure we're getting all the micronutrients we need, understanding the blood sugar stuff, understanding keto. It's completely optional to go into ketosis in my program. It is just something that some people do. Some people are not up to it. Some people do the program a whole time through and they go back and then they do ketosis the next time. So everyone's going to do a different version of this. It's not like everyone gets the same thing, because that wouldn't work, right? Module 2 is all about digestion, because I told you it's so integral. It's such an important piece of this, because I have a lot of people increasing their fats and they're like, now I'm having digestive issues. Like I have to run to the bathroom. I'm like, we have to do module 2, it's just so important. Fixing your gut health, so much inflammation comes down. It's just like, oh my gosh, my body's just working so much better. And then we look at adrenals, because we have to get down the stress. If we're talking about blood sugar, it's so linked. And also for my reactive hypoglycemia friends, we have to support that big time, so they stop crashing. We look at liver and detox, and there's a whole module for carb ups. And so that's the last module. We want to make sure that people are getting in carbohydrates as soon as they can, what to eat at different times in the cycle to support estrogen and progesterone building foods. And then there's a lot of bonus content. So like how to build a plate, how to test your blood sugar and interpret this stuff, meditations and recipes and batch cooking classes and all sorts of stuff. And then we have weekly coaching calls, and those are really helpful. And people say that what's most helpful are the questions that I didn't even ask, that other people asked and I didn't even think to ask. So I love the group coaching format so much.
Oh, so do I. I think it's so great.
It's so good.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to link everybody to her site and all of this in the show notes, so you can just go directly over there and check out her site, but also check out her podcast. I was just on it recently, but it's the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. It's great. You can tell she's a fantastic speaker, so you're going to be happy when you listen to her podcast.
Thank you.
All right, Dani. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'll have to have you back again, because I could have just kept on asking you questions. So we'll have to have a part 2. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Karen.